We should be live by now. So welcome to the closing event of Capital Literature 2022, the International Literary Festival held in Sofia, Bulgaria since 2009 and organized by the Elizabeth Kostova Foundation for Creative Writing. Hello, I'm Violeta, Director of the Foundation. And for those of you who are new to our organization, the Foundation was founded in 2007 by American writer Elizabeth Kostova in public interest with a mission to support Bulgarian writers and contemporary Bulgarian literature, but also so much more. 15 years later, the Elizabeth Kostova Foundation is creating meaningful, lasting, and beautiful literary bridges between Bulgaria and the Anglosphere. Our 2022 Capital Literature program, Writing to Save the World, features a series of public lectures and creative writing workshops on writing in response to the climate emergency. I'm happy to welcome American poet, essayist, and professor of creative writing, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, whose latest collection of nature essays, World of Wonders in Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments, became a New York Times bestselling book and was chosen as Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year. And here to introduce her is Natalie Bakopoulos, author of Scorpionfish and The Green Shore. Natalie's work has appeared in Plowshares, Ninth Letter, Kenyon Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Tin House, the New York Times, among others. She's an assistant professor of creative writing at Wayne State University, Detroit, and a faculty member of the summer program Writing Workshops in Greece. Welcome, Aimee and Natalie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Violeta, and thanks to you. Nice to meet you, and thanks to the Elizabeth Kostova Foundation for this event. And it's such a great pleasure to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, a wonderful poet and essayist in person too. She's the author of 4 poetry collections, Oceanic from Copper Canyon Press, and 3 from Tupelo Press, Lucky Fish at the Dive-In Volcano and Miracle Fruit. More recently, she's the author of the New York Times bestselling illustrated collection of nature essays, as Violeta mentioned, World of Wonders and Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments, which was chosen as Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year. Her most recent chapbook she's working on her most recent chapbook is Lace and Pyrite, a collaboration of epistolary poems with the poet Ross Gay, whose recent book of Delights is also a delight. I recommend it. Her work has twice appeared in Best American Poetry, as well as the New York Times, ESPN, Plowshares, American Poetry Review, Tin House. She's received a NEA fellowship and recently was a Guggenheim Fellow in Poetry. And she's a professor of English and creative writing in the University of Mississippi's MFA program, and also a faculty member of writing workshops in Greece with me, where we've been teaching together for several summers now. Of course, this introduction says nothing about Aimee's beautiful work, which you will read from today and talk about also. And so would like to do a little bit of introduction. World of Wonders is a collection of essays about the natural world, about flora and fauna, whether it's the flamingo or dragon fruit or octopus or firefly. And it's about discovery, the way the exploration of the outdoors became a way for Aimee to find home. There's a beautiful undercurrent of searching here, of a constant sort of becoming, of finding things that were there all along. And as I think they might talk about today, the way our reverence and awe of the natural world corresponds to our acknowledgement of our place in that world, as Aimee writes, to sense one's presence on the earth. In World of Wonders, Aimee Nezhukumatathil claims space and asserts an essential voice in the world of nature writing, one that was often given a very narrow approach, often in the world of white men, nature with a capital N. In this collection, Aimee also writes the personal of not being heard, say, or of a world that has predetermined ideas of who you are. In one essay, Aimee writes of trying and wanting to disappear while also feeling like her own experience as a young Asian American girl, then woman, was overlooked, whether because of something a teacher or classmate said, or simply her own perception of the world around her. And this book is about growth, growing pains, a growing family, a growing marriage, a growing body of writing, and the growing sons who end the book with their own sets of questions and wonderment. And what is perhaps my favorite moment of the book, Aimee gives voices to the delicate and powerful blinking light of fireflies, their luminescent flashing, saying, I am still here, you are still here, I am still here, you are still here. World of Wonders is about reverence and awe, of course, but more broadly, an exploration of the mysteries and wonder of love and the ways our personal histories are a part of natural histories too. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Aimee Nezhukumatathil today in conversation. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for the lovely introduction to Aimee's work.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, Violeta and Natalie, it's just so fun. I have this when I found out that I'll be chatting with you. It never feels like work. It always feels like chatting with a good friend, and I'm so honored to be here with you. I'm going to read a selection from my book, World of Wonders, and then we'll open it up for it. I'll go back to chatting with Natalie for everybody. And the chapter I wanted to read today this is a collection of about 28 animals and plants that I was curious about. And I want to stress that I was curious about them. I am not an expert in these plants. I am a poet at heart, as Violeta mentioned. And I come to it with a poet's heart and with a curious mind. I just had so many questions about them. And when I started discussing these plants and animals with my then 6 and 9-year-old boys, I found out I couldn't answer these questions. I couldn't describe these animals without memories of my own kind of popping through. And then it kind of gelled for me together one day. And all these pieces are short. Nothing is over 5 pages. And I chose to read from the chapter on monarch butterflies because actually just this week, I want to say Sunday or Monday, it was declared that monarch butterflies for the first time in recorded history have been moved to the endangered species list. And that was something that had not been the case 4 years ago when I started this book. So it's kind of devastating and heartbreaking to me. And I'll just share a couple paragraphs. Oops. So sorry, as I was talking, my bookmark fell out. Hang on one moment. Okay. So I'm going to mention this lake called Lake Superior. It's the topmost lake in the United States, the northernmost lake in the United States. Monarch butterfly. There's a spot over Lake Superior where migrating butterflies veer sharply. No one understood why they make such a quick turn at that specific place until a geologist finally made the connection. A mountain once rose out of the water in that exact location thousands of years ago. These butterflies and their offspring can still remember a mass they've never seen, sound waves breaking just so, and fly out of the way. How do they pass on this knowledge of the invisible? Does this message transmit through the song they sing to themselves on their first wild nights, spinning inside a chrysalis? Or in the music kissed down their backs as they crack themselves open to the morning sun? Does milkweed whisper instructions to them as it scatters in the meadow? A few years ago in our home in Mississippi, in the final gasps of summer, a beautiful lime green chrysalis in the doorway of our front porch that my family had been eagerly watching did not open. My husband and I had never heard of this happening, so we did what we always do when parenthood confounds us. We decided to wait and see. The walls of the chrysalis had grown nearly transparent. Our sons could see the familiar pattern of orange and black of the monarch's wing folded neatly inside. But they checked on it first thing when they woke, after racing home after school, and they checked again before bed. My gardening friend said to give it another week. We gave it 2, and then 3. Still nothing. On more than one occasion, I found my youngest squatting down, talking to it, cheering it on like the monarch was in some kind of race. Come on, you could do it. Don't you want to be born, little butterfly? we have lots of milkweed here. Come on, you can do it. And I'll just pause right here, but that's just an excerpt from that chapter, and it turns out that chrysalis never cracked, and that was the first. It never cracked open, and that was the first time I had ever seen that happening in my whole life. And that was just maybe a couple years ago, and even just since then, in the last 4 years, there's been a marked decline in the amount of chrysalises that we had in our backyard. So I knew something was going on with these butterflies, but to see it in the news, the AP News reported it, that it is now officially, the numbers have declined so much, it's now officially endangered, just kind of took my breath away. That's the first one of these, of the animals that I wrote about that has been bumped down to an endangered species list. So kind of heartbreaking, but I wanted to share that today.
Thank you, Aimee, for giving us a taste of your writing. And it is indeed devastating that such amazing creatures are leaving this earth, and maybe
literally this week, yeah,
our children will never see them. Your collection of essays, A World of Wonders, is essentially a love letter to our planet and its wondrous creatures. So I was wondering what propelled you to write these essays in the first place?
That's such a good question. And I wish I had a better answer, but the truth is they kind of were, they were all directed to my children. This ended up being kind of a revised version of these for the kind of the bedtime stories from 2016, which in the States, we were going through a very tumultuous presidential election, a lot of kind of scary and sad things on the news. In particular for my 6 and 9-year-olds. So it was a lot of, they had a lot of questions at night going to bed. Mommy, I heard this. Is this true? Did this happen in the news? Why are kids in cages? What, why did this brown person get shot? A lot of things that were going on. I did not have a lot of the answers. I still don't have a lot of the answers, but I started to kind of talk about, it's kind of a deflection, I gave answers as best as I could, but then I was like, let's talk about the narwhal, let's talk about a flamingo, Then I realized these animals that kind of I love and adore all had just begat more questions and more questions, like where do narwhals come from? That kind of thing, like how do they move? How do they survive in one of the most unfriendly places for humans ever, the Arctic Circle, that kind of thing. Did you know flamingos' mommy had black wings, and I did not know that. It took my sons to kind of point that out to me. All this time, I thought I had a pretty good idea of what a flamingo is. And so their curiosity was kind of contagious. And then after they went to bed, I just started writing these down almost just as a record. Like, this is what we talked about. Here's some questions I had about this bird, this whale, that kind of thing. And before I knew it, I started getting these published one by one. But these were, and obviously I revised it for a broader audience, but a close reader can tell that there's a tenderness and you can almost picture, now that you know that these were kind of bedtime stories for my kids, it's probably no surprise, but I went from telling my kids about these plants and animals to kind of imagining my best friends. I know that there's a limit. I could talk about narwhals all day long, and I won't do that here. Because when it comes down to it, I'm a big nerd. I love reading about animals. I have since I was a little kid. And I kind of just never stopped. So it started with a way to kind of make sense of this crazy political season in the United States. What am I talking about? We're still in a big, crazy political season, but in 2016 was a big shift in particular, I think.
Yeah. So it's a letter to your kids as well.
Yes.
Kind of a legacy of love that you're passing down to them. But World of Wonders is also memoir writing. It's there is intimate writing. There is poetry writing in it, poetry woven in those essays. So it's not just about the wonders of the natural world. It's about the wonders of your world. Mm. So how did you decide on this structure? And as a follow-up question, do you think that writing about nature and the environment more personal might be the key to inspiring climate action?
That's such a good question, such a smart question. Thank you. You know, the very first essay I wrote for the book, there's 2 essays on fireflies in there, but it's the very first essay on fireflies. That's the first one I wrote and said, I think I'm going to make this into a book. And it turns out I always think of my mother when I think of fireflies. And, you know, she's Filipina. She's retired now. She works so hard, 80, 90 plus hours. So when we did have vacation, there was such precious time together. And it was not always perfect. There was many kind of screaming matches. And, you know, I was a moody teen. I didn't always want to hang out with my parents, but I could not think of fireflies without thinking about those really rare vacations where we were all together, and we're all scattered now across the country. So as much as I love the science and the biology and, you know, all the nerdy things of what makes fireflies glow, I just can't extract that from thinking of my childhood or my youth. And also, it's not a form I invented by any means. This is a form that, you know, that has been around for hundreds of years, where explorers or scientists or writers see something and it reminds them of their youth. What was missing is that Asian American women were not part of this equation. So, and by all means, I am not the first. It's so rare to see an Asian American voice outside, so much so. I know this sounds so silly, Violeta, but it's true. I grew up in the 80s and 70s, and I literally never saw anybody who looked like me in any books, movies, TV shows. I loved MTV. I never saw anybody that looked like me on MTV, you know, music television. And so what that tells a young kid is, you don't belong here outside. How dare you write about the outside? Leave it to the experts. In this case, people who don't have that much more experience than me, and sometimes less, but they're white and they're male, you know, that kind of thing. So I guess, you know, I never set out to do this on purpose, you know, that kind of thing. But I really want, if we're writing about climate change and how to start small, how to, you know, sometimes climate change can be overwhelming. You don't know where to start. But one thing you could always do is start from where you love. And the reason I'm not trying to be dismissive of any other tactics, but for me, I know I have to take a good hard look in the mirror. When do I get moved to action? When do I get moved to donate something, or to march, or to call my government officials, or to write letters? It's when I'm doing it not out of fear, not out of anger, but it's out of love. So every chapter, once I kind of made that connection, I wanted to begin and end the book with love. I wanted every chapter to be filled, even if it was a sad moment, if it was an unsure moment, a chapter that has a lot of questions. I wanted love and tenderness to be everywhere, so that you would be outraged as I am that monarch, but once you love something, you'll want to take action. What can I do to help monarch butterflies across the world? You know, well, you can start small. You can plant a pot of milkweed. You know, it's so cheap. It's a native plant, but it's literally the only food that monarch butterflies can eat, that they're able to eat. So that's something small. But yeah, I wanted to start. There's other, you know, there's a time and place for everything. And sometimes we need those books that cause us to feel angry. Sometimes we need those books to scare the daylights out of us. But also we need books that remind us what it is to love and be curious, so that hopefully then you'll be inspired to do some action.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this very naturally brings me to my next question. Yeah. Because as you mentioned, a lot of writing about nature and the environment is apocalyptic these days. Whereas you seem to write from a place of tenderness and love, as you just said. So, your use of lyrical narrative strategies, as well as this deeply empathetic grounding in personal experience, makes this collection of essays unlike any other book on nature and ecology. So just let me read a paragraph from Corpse Flower.
Sure.
I can't get over the plant's temperature. When you touch the spadix of a corpse flower, it feels almost human, full of blood, and you might expect to feel your hand pulse at its heartbeat. Just last week, I read how trees speak to each other underground, how they let out warnings of toxins or deforestation. Trees have also been known to form alliances and friendships through fungal networks. All of these findings are still new, but I'm in love with the idea that plants have a temperature, that they can run warm and cold when they need to, that they can send signals to species who will help them, not harm them. And what a magnificent telegraph we might send back, especially if other humans have ever made you feel alone on this earth. So how can we channel this sense of kinship into better understanding our connection with nature? What is this magnificent telegraph we might send back?
Well, thank you so much. I love hearing your voice is so beautiful. Reading, like, who wrote that? You know, that's it's amazing to hear it in your voice. So thank you. It's such an important question. I guess I would answer, and I love that question so much. I think what it comes down to is when you are, and I'm trying to phrase this in a simple way, because I could talk, another half an hour about this, because this is central to my teaching. It's central to how I kind of try to nurture my own children. I guess what I would say is what that telegraph might be is twofold. I think when curiosity and wonder is a habit, like, you're never alone. Like, it's contagious. You want to know more. You want to share it, that kind of thing. So I guess the first step is being open to learning, being curious. And I know it sounds maybe even facile, but you and I both know people in our lives who are not curious about anything besides themselves, how to get themselves more money, more power. And you could see it in their eyes. You could see, like, they just give off a whole different energy. I think plants can sense that too, honestly, and trees can sense that too, who is going to harm them and who is going to care for them and nurture them. So one, we need to be open to wonderment and curiosity. And for some of us, we've never stopped. Some people need to be just kind of gently reminded, but the beauty is that it's free. It doesn't cost a thing. You just have to remember, it's kind of like that childlike sense of being open and alive and wondering about this planet. It's no surprise that so many kids, some of their first words is look, or wow, or what? Look at the moon. What is this? Look at this rock. Like, they're astonished. So I would just say, let yourself be open and astonished, first of all, because when you're curious about something, it also is a vulnerability. What that means is you are telling somebody, I don't have all the answers. Do you have the answers? Can you teach me? And that's an invitation of sharing, first of all, that I think so many of us have gotten away from, or we've put up walls. We've been burned so many times before. I think something happens, at least in the States, maybe about age 13, 15, when we're in, just exploring teenagehood, where it doesn't become cool anymore to be astonished, hopefully it's not, but I can see, even for my eldest, who's a teenager now, his friends, it's not cool to say, maybe, look at the moon. Wow. You'd be made fun of. My son thankfully does it anyway, and I hope he never loses that sense of wonder or astonishment. But whatever we can do, and stay away from people who are kind of like a wonder snatchers or curiosity snatchers. People who are not curious, don't date them. Don't, just get them out of your life. Because they will, it's also just, I don't know, not to get too, I'm hearing myself out loud, and it's kind of funny because I'm not really like this, but they really drain your soul. And when you are surrounded by too many people who are not curious, that I think is also actually really dangerous. That means they don't want to learn about other cultures, other people. In this book, I included animals that I've never seen before, as well as common animals, what I thought was common, like a butterfly, because I wanted to showcase that even for a nerd like me, there's still room to be curious. I am not a know-it-all by any means. And that means in poetry, that means in science, with animals and plants. I always want to know more. I think the day we stop learning to be curious, the day we admit there's nothing for me to learn, is kind of fatal. I mean, it's kind of like what are you doing with your life, So that's kind of a big answer to your question, but I would say, I don't think enough time is spent on what are you doing to actually admit, to be vulnerable, that you don't have all the answers. We've seen world leaders to think, I know it all. I don't need to listen to any advisors. I'm just doing the thing I need to gain power, that kind of thing. Only care about the people that look like me, that move like me, that love like me. I shouldn't be curious about anybody else. We see the disastrous effects of what happens when we only take care of people who are just like us, or things that we're familiar with. Everything in nature is telling us otherwise. So I've always been very dubious when people say, America first, or, we're number one. Everything else in nature teaches us that we are connected, and you die if you're not connected in nature. You know what I mean? You die if you get separated from the pack. You die, so why on earth would a country or a group of people want to be separated from the rest of nature? Every other living thing says no to that. So, yeah, anyway, sorry, that's a big answer. So I told you I have a lot of things to say about it.
Well, that's great. You talk a lot about this sense of wonder, which is characteristic of children mainly. But do you ever happen to lose it? And when you do, how do you get it back?
Gosh, I don't think I have, but I will say, to be honest, especially during the early days of the pandemic, it's not like I woke out of bed and said, I can't wait to have wonder in my life. I'm human. But I've never lost, one thing I can say is I've never lost my sense of curiosity. I think most writers can say they haven't lost their sense of curiosity. We oftentimes, when I'm chatting with my writer friends, we write to figure out, to make sense of things, or we write and we don't even know what we're writing towards. And then, it gets revealed, that kind of thing. That is exhilarating to me. My whole life being curious about this planet has been exhilarating. Learning something new is exhilarating. So I know that's not everybody. So I want to address that. But what I go back to, though, is that we all had it as kids. I think I'd say 99% of us had it as kids. And if you're one of the 1% who didn't, I think it can be taught, and it's free. And I guess it's simply to kind of, I don't know. I've done whole workshops on this, but part of it is to give yourself some time to daydream. Writers need time, artists need time, humans need time to daydream without getting thoughts put in our head and ads and commercials. So that means in 2022 to kind of stay off the screen for a little bit. We can all, including me, can reduce our screen time. I'm very much guilty of that, especially those times that we were home. I try to notice it, though, and be aware, like, hey, you're feeling extra stressed today. Maybe it's correlating to how much screen time you've had, how much doom-filled news I've been consuming. Not to say to ignore it, but just to reduce it down. I don't think that's good for your brain. I think studies have shown, and I think we're still in the thick of it, that actually has changed our sense of our sense of attention, by like, the quick new thing, that kind of thing always. And it sounds so silly, but I know, and everybody is limited in some ways, depending on where you are, but to be outside a little bit, ask yourself, what don't you know about the planet? I mean, hopefully you'll be able to answer a lot of things, that kind of thing. I mean, I have thousands of things I don't know. What happens to ants in the winter? What are the 12 names of clouds? I always, kind of joke with my students, but it's not a joke. If there's 12 kinds of clouds, do you know how to name 3 of them? If you don't, it's not too late. That's something that you could do from a library. You could look at the internet, see if you could teach yourself the names of 3 types of clouds. That's not being quirky. That's being human, just wanting to know what the world is around you. Again, we care about the things that we know. So instead of just saying, oh, there's a patch of forest with some birds in it, who cares? I'll put a giant gas station there, But if you knew that there were things called painted buntings and they look like a rainbow. I mean, there's blue, red, orange, yellow, green feathered birds. It looks like a miniature rainbow. And there's something called indigo buntings that are as blue as this, vibrant, that blue in a tree. I'm not saying it'll prevent people from putting up a gas station, but maybe it would give them pause to know these amazing creatures are in there. And not just because of their beauty, but because without those birds, salamanders wouldn't be around. Those salamanders take care of a certain population of insects, and certain population of insects are the food of frogs. And frogs are one of those keystone species. If you don't have frogs in your environment, that's one of those red flags, like your environment is about to be terrible. Like unfit to live in, that kind of thing. So again, we're all connected. And I guess I'm just saying, like, wonder is so important because it's so tied in with curiosity, not just for plants and animals, but for other people. Oh, what is Violeta's life like on the other side of this planet? If I don't care and if I'm not curious, that doesn't bode well for our shared sense of humanity, Anyway, so I can go on and give a lecture, but it's just to start small because it can be overwhelming. It doesn't happen overnight, but you could ask yourself, what can I learn today about something else besides myself? The clouds. Can you name 2 birds in your village, in your city, in your town, in your state? What are some 5 native insects, that kind of thing. Do you have the answers to these questions? If not, who does? Send an email, give a phone call, walk to your library, things like that. Visit your university. Scientists would be thrilled that someone is genuinely curious about this stuff before it's too late, before things are endangered.
Mm. So curiosity is a lifesaver.
Absolutely. It literally saves lives.
Quite literally. I would like to take you to your primary occupation, that of a poet, because you have an established and prolific career as a poet with 6 published collections of poetry, which is great, by the way. Much of your poetry is also driven by what you see in the natural world. And your poems have titles such as I Could Be a Whale Shark, or Hummingbird Abecedarian, or Why I'm Not Afraid of King Cobras, the First Anniversary with Monkeys, and Last Aerogram to You with Lizard. So World of Wonders is your first work of nonfiction. Mm-hmm. But as I already mentioned, it still reads as poetry. So why didn't you go for your elemental medium. What is it in nonfiction that allowed you to focus more precisely on nature?
Thank you. Well, nature has always been, as you mentioned, it's been one of my favorite subjects to write about. I can't make sense of the world without talking about the beautiful natural metaphors that come out of observing nature, of being in nature, that kind of thing. And I want to say, we're all in nature, no matter what. I'm in my house, but I'm in nature as well. I don't mean to make it seem like nature is something you have to go to, we're all in nature. But I have a habit of saying that all the time, and I want to start to correct that. I could address questions that I had in poetry, but what I could not do, what I felt anyway, limited in, is the expansiveness of the sentence. So for me, poetry was all about breath and hesitation and suspense when you get to the end of a line. And for me, the sentence is just, you could unfurl, I could stretch out my legs, unfurl like a fern frond, and really kind of dig in to questions upon questions and get more questions and things like that without ever having to work. I call it the tyranny of the line break. So I will always write poetry. I just wrote something last week. But what the essay does is it allows me that breathing space to not have to worry about, I'm still concerned about every word, that's but I don't have to worry about, when I get to the end of the line, is there tension? Get to the end of the line, is there tension? I'm just letting my sentences unfurl. So I know some readers have said, she likes long sentences. It's true. After years, I think 20 plus years of having compressed lines, I just finally was able to stretch my legs a little bit more. But in terms of writing about nature, I've been doing that, it's how I make sense of my place on the planet. And I will tell you why. There's an actual concrete reason why. Because I didn't see people like me who had crushes, who were just, having an argument with their mom when I was a teenager, or, first dates, even getting married, having kids, and loving the outdoors. Heaven forbid, actually wanting to spend time with my husband. I never saw any of that. It always felt like you had to choose. Well, you can have kids, but you won't be outside, that kind of thing. Or you could be outside, but most women who are outside, the ones who are writing and getting attention, didn't wear makeup. Or like men, or, that kind of thing. I wanted to showcase, like Walt Whitman says, do I contain multitudes? Very well, I contain multitudes. I unabashedly love terrible pop music. I love makeup. I love spending time with my kids. I do consider my husband such great, great company. And I also love finding out how fireflies glow. And I love being a nerd, and I love having my own space outside too. I love teaching. I love all of those things. And I also am grateful for it all as well. So what I had been, at least what was given to me in classrooms was always straight white men's point of view on everything on the outdoors, or their first experiences with a fresh crush, or dating, or going to university, or things like that. Like I wanted to put myself into books. So I did, that kind of thing. So because I didn't want to wait for other people to do it. Now, I'm not the first by any means. I'm not the first Asian American nature writer or anything like that. But I think when you look down to it, it's very few and far between who write about their best girlfriends and spending time with their husband, and also spending time alone, and also being a mother, and also someone who loves teaching. I mean, I just didn't see, and also someone who loves ridiculous pop music and makeup, that kind of thing. You could be whatever it is for each person. I just don't, I'm so over in 2022, limiting what we can and can write about. Who has the authority to write about this? Like somehow, if I like makeup or if I have a kid, that somehow, my authority on writing about climate change is diminished. Like, where do you get off? How is that any better than a elderly white man who is a serial womanizer? How does that not impede on his credentials of the outdoors? You know what I mean? There's just, so it's very different. It's 2022. So I wanted our literature of the outdoors to be different than 1952, honestly, is what it comes down to it. And I wanted to reflect the world that I want to live in and what I want my kids to live in. And that means people who need wheelchairs, people who love women, women who love women, men who love men, just all different backgrounds. They should be able to write about the outdoors. Why? Not because of any degrees or not because of any pedigree, but because they are human and they share the world. That seems so basic, but publishers, editors, university people, they ignored that until just kind of recently. So what seems basic to you and me was not always the case even 10 years ago. So it's slow, but hopefully now we can have a waterfall of people from all backgrounds writing about the outdoors.
Great. So it's not just ending the tyranny of the line, but also of this legacy, let's say, who is allowed to talk about what.
Yes, exactly.
Would you say that the poem is a good vessel for climate communication? Can a poem contain such a huge topic? And also, I was wondering, how can poetry help us understand the urgency of the climate crisis within its confines, with these short lines that we are given?
I mean, I think with any subject, but in particular with climate crisis, what a poem can do is that it helps you kind of be in tune with your breath. I notice when I'm like holding my breath when I'm reading something, I have to get to the next line. And then also I can feel myself exhale when I get to the end of a poem. When you go to a poetry reading, maybe you hear this in person, you can hear everybody doing it. It's like, it's awesome. Sometimes very audible, like, what I love about poetry is it gives us time to slow down in a world that values the quick, the easy, the next best thing. Poetry makes you turn inward. It makes you reflect. And for me, when I was reflecting, I turn inward, like, what can I do? What can I do? Okay, koalas are on fire. What can I do? What can I do? It just makes me like, it takes my breath away. What else has been on fire that I don't know? That kind of thing. Then it becomes, again, that curiosity begets curiosity. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in a compressed space, metaphor helps us feel like something that is taking place on the other side of the planet makes it feel like it's taking place right in front of you. So it becomes much more immediate. It becomes much more, when you read a good poem and the lines and the metaphors stick with you, I could be washing the dishes, washing the dog, and I still think about it, So in some ways it's better than any kind of commercial about the environment that goes on quick and then come out. A poem stays, I think for most kind of careful readers, a poem can live inside you. Certain phrases or a chant will make you like, it changes you. And hopefully that changes your actions as well.
Yeah, indeed. Nothing works like the magnifying glass of poetry.
Yes,
you can put it that way. I want to ask you a question that has to do with your work as a professor of creative writing. Mm-hmm. What purely practical advice would you give to literary writers in relation to writing about nature? Let's say, would you invite them to transcend mere observation and mingle that with personal experience? And what writing prompts or exercises do you find helpful?
So good. I alluded to it before, and I feel a little bit guilty because just before I logged on, I was on my phone as well. But the times that I'm writing the best are when I kind of take a break from social media and the internet and things like that. So I would say limit your screen time. Honestly, that's advice that I would not have given even 5 years ago, but I see it within myself. I see it with my students. It is harder and harder to do so. So on a purely practical level, try to go as what my kids now call old school, which is pencil and paper. Like, I know sometimes, some people might have some medical issues that they need a computer. But if you can, there's something, and I'm not a scientist, but there's something about writing longhand. I feel like I am more creative. I make more visual leaps when I'm writing longhand than when I'm drafting something on a screen. I can feel it from a mile away. I can write an essay about tomatoes, which is what I'm doing right now, on my laptop, and it'll be fine. It might even get published, but it won't have that what is it, for lack of a better word, that duende, that almost undefinable, like, oomph, that little spice, or something that speaks into other people if I'm not doing it longhand. That's just for me. So I would, as long as you're physically able to, try to do that. But I would also try to read something that's not literature. So, for example, I'm trying to see on my screen here, it's like The Hidden World of Ants. I was literally reading that book. I am not planning on writing about ants. I'm literally writing about tomatoes, but I'm reading about ants. The other day I was reading, there's a certain sponge in the sea. It's a purple sponge in the sea. I'm not planning on writing about a sponge or the sea. I'm literally writing tomatoes. But I feel like when you are exposing yourself to vocabulary from other subjects, your own vocabulary becomes so much richer. Your capacity for metaphor becomes so much richer. So I always joke with my students, I don't believe in writer's block, but go through the library, find something, read about how did electricity get started, or whatever subject interests you. What is the chemical composition of dirt? I don't know. Just, again, be curious. Even if you're not planning on writing that, you'd be surprised. Oh, maybe one of your metaphors has something to do with dirt or something like that later on, But if you're just you and a piece of paper, never reading anything outside of your normal kind of thing, yikes, I could spot that writing from a mile away, So try to get the duende in your work by reading way outside your subject matter, and there's no excuse now that there's internet and libraries, and hopefully the world is opening up a little bit more again. I don't know. I know cases here in Mississippi are going up again for COVID, so who knows? But I would read, and I would say as a prompt, I think of it as kind of like, I think of this as what an athlete does for exercises, like maybe this exercise might help you run a marathon next. But if you don't do it, it's going to be that much harder to run the marathon if you just wake up tomorrow and decide, I'm going to run a giant race. So what I would say, these exercises for writers is take an object off your shelf. I don't know, or go outside and find it, a feather, a shell, I don't know, a crumpled up pair of sunglasses from somebody. Just spend like 2 pages writing it, just pure description. What does it smell like? What does it, I don't know, taste like maybe in some cases? Just the size of it, how would you describe it to a perfect stranger? That is writing. It may not contribute to your tomato essay if you're writing about tomatoes, but that's writing. That's exercising your powers of description. That's keeping it loose so that when you do have time to write, when you are sitting down, I'm going to write a poem now, something like that, you're not starting fresh. You're not rusty, things like it's really the equivalent of someone waking up and deciding, I'm going to run, 10 kilometers today, no exercise whatsoever. I mean, you can, but it'll be sore. You'll be sore. So whatever you could do to kind of keep that exercise in, to me, that's writing. It may result in a poem or a story or something like that, but it may not. But I promise if you do enough of them, you'll benefit in the long run.
Yeah, you draw so much inspiration from what you see from your surroundings and the world around you. Do you read any environmental literature? Are there works that influenced you in some way while you were writing World of Wonders?
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually reading something. Actually, I want to get it because I want to show you real quick. It's on my desk right now. It's this beautiful book called Climate Lyricism. And the author is Min Hyung Song. It's reversed here. Min Hyung Song. And it's just talking, it's kind of, it's how to read literature with a climate change centered viewpoint, that kind of thing. So she talks about, Kazuo Ishiguro, Claudia Rankine, but how it's basically, it's another way of reading climate lyricism into literature. So that's from the professor point of view. I love this. I literally got this book 2 days ago, and I'm kind of a third of the way through of it. So I love that so much. But one thing I was reading as I was writing World of Wonder and it's such a completely different book, but it was just such a nice kind of guide. It was almost like the sweet, wise aunt over my shoulder. And the book is called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. We share a press, so I have to disclose that. But this book is just, it's so stunning, and it's full of indigenous wisdom from Native Americans, and she presents it in such a way that doesn't talk down to us, that doesn't treat the reader as stupid, or she's not full of anger. There's just a tenderness and saying, hey, there's other ways to live. There's other ways that listening close to the environment will teach you how we're supposed to live, things like that, what we can learn. Again, it asks us to humble ourselves and be curious about the planet. So I love that as like a kind of a almost sister companion or cousin companion to World of Wonders, for sure.
Great, thank you. We're bringing this discussion to a close now, but I just have this one final question. And was there any plant or animal that you wanted to celebrate in your book, but somehow it didn't happen?
Yes, and it's like it's torture because someone once asked me this, and when I said it out loud, I see, or maybe it's one of those things I saw it all the time, and then I'm just now seeing it extra. But there's a creature called the blanket octopus. If you don't know what this is, you have to look it up on YouTube. I promise you'll just be dazzled. You'll be astonished that this creature shares the planet with us. It's this beautiful iridescent octopus. I already wrote about an octopus, the kind of the giant, the one that's off the coast of, actually I wrote about one in particular in Greece. But this octopus, the blanket octopus, is iridescent in a way that I couldn't actually I had met my match, and maybe I'll be able to do it 10 years from now or what, but I met my match in how to describe the sheer iridescence, how it changes. So once you see it, you'll know why. This was the Achilles heel of the poet. I couldn't do this animal justice and also find a way to write memoir about it, that kind of thing. So I just said, Blanket Octopus, I'm letting you go. But I love telling people about it. And now people send me other videos of blanket octopuses. I saw a poster of one the other day. So it's torture. But yeah, that's one I regret not being able to do.
Great. This reminded me of my favorite octopus, which is the Dumbo octopus.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That was actually on I had an initial list of 200 plants and animals, and I whittled it down to 30. And that was heartbreaking. Dumbo octopus was on there. So that's great. But look up blanket octopus if you don't know. You'll your whole day will be made just watching it float in the ocean.
Oh, thank you, Aimee, so much. I see now that we have some questions in the Q&A section, but we're wrapping it up. But I will read one of these. There is a lengthier one. I think curiosity naturally finds its home in children. I share your experience with the natural world as a transporter to childhood. Fireflies disappeared from my native Bulgaria, and finding them in my newly acquired home city, New York, had such a strong emotional connection to childhood. When I immigrated to New York, I smuggled geranium from my childhood place and planted it in my community garden in Manhattan. As kids, we used to create our own herbariums. I thought of your book as more advanced and intricate literary herbarium. Can you speak to the actual readership of World of Wonders and the one you imagined, kids versus grown-ups, the curious ones and those who supposedly lost their curiosity and need your book as an instigator?
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a great question. I love the fact that you found fireflies again back in New York. So that means the world to me. And one of the biggest joys of writing a book like World of Wonders is I get stories like that every day of an animal in the book or a plant in the book that reminds them of when they last saw it, or some new anecdote about fireflies, or the last time they saw a corpse flower bloom, or someone who had never seen it bloom. They thought I was making it up, and then they finally saw one in a garden, So it's just been so delightful to connect with readers all over the world, all over the planet about this. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier before, but I did not know this was going to be a book. This was absolutely just going to be a record. I was just typing them up for my children so that I can give them something soothing to read during a very tumultuous time when the news was so scary for them. They had a lot of concerns and worries. So I wasn't saying, oh, I'm going to write a book now. That was absolutely not even on my radar. It happened when someone, some editors are saying, I need writing on the environment. I need writing about nature. Do you have anything? I said, I have nothing at the moment, because what I've been writing has just been these little kind of bedtime stories for my kids. Oh, let me see that. And then one by one, it just kind of went from there. Editors started picking them up. So the fact that anybody that's not related to me has read this book is still such a shock to me, because also the thing that I've not mentioned here is that this was published in September 2020, in the middle. We're still in the middle, but in the middle of the hardest part of the pandemic. We still didn't have vaccines. Everything was shut down in America, I think across the world mostly. My editor was even saying, we don't even know if we'll have the book because of everything is stopped. Bookstores, distribution, everything like that. So I am so unspeakably grateful to anybody. This was word of mouth. A librarian or a bookseller told their sister gave it to their son gave it to a coach gave it to, the thing of it is, the biggest surprise is maybe because we were all home, people were reading. that was I guess it makes sense in some ways, but people were reading. And so when they were, and the common thing, what I've heard from booksellers all over the world is when my customers asked, I need something to read that isn't depressing, I just told them your book. You read your book. And then that person shared it with another person. So it was word of mouth. The big distributors like, and bookstores like Amazon, which is evil, they didn't even have my book in stock from September to April of the next year. So this was an indie effort. This was an indie press. Two dear young publicists and me, my social media account. That was kind of it. So the readership grew and grew and grew, and universities have adopted it for their kind of community reads. The state of Indiana has adopted it as their community read, the state of Nevada. So different states, different groups, different universities, but also to my great delight, schools and junior high. So in the States, it would be about age 12 and up. So I didn't expect that young would be reading it, but it turns out that was kind of like, actually even a little bit younger. I got a 5th grade class who sent me their own kind of thank you notes, and they did their own World of Wonders in California. And they were 5th graders, so that's 10 years old. It's just been amazing from ages 10 to 100, the audience that this book has found. I don't take a minute of it for granted. I'm human. I was crying when they told me that the book was pretty much going to just be sunk in the water because it's the pandemic. I had 1 week of sadness, and then I thought, okay, let's move on. The world is in danger. Who am I to feel sad about my book when there are people literally dying all over the world? So I moved on. I was like, okay, let's write some poems now, that kind of thing. But little by little, this grassroots effort just surprised me so much. So I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you, Aimee. And as I gradually dissolve in the darkness of Sophia, it's time to go back, Natalie, so we can say goodbye to you and our viewers.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me a part of this and for the opportunity to introduce Aimee and to listen, Aimee. That was wonderful, always hearing you talk about your work. So thank you. Thank you, Violeta.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you to the whole group for hosting me. It's been so amazing to see the past conversations and things like that. I'm so honored to be a part of this big conversation.
Thank you both, and thank you all for joining our 2022 Capital Literature Program, Writing to Save the World. This event is organized with the financial support of Sofia Municipality and the National Culture Fund. We are looking forward to bringing you the 2023 edition of our International Literary Festival in Sofia. Until then, head out to our social media outlets or subscribe to our newsletter at ekf.pg for more details on what's coming next. Thank you all. Good day and good evening, and stay healthy, happy, and in love. See you.